Imagine trying to regulate a modern 5G smartphone network using an instruction manual written for a horse-drawn carriage.
Yeah, that sounds like a nightmare.
It really does. But the crazy thing is, until December 2023, that was actually India's reality. I mean, one of the fastest growing digital economies in the world, governed by laws drafted in 1885.
The disconnect was just staggering. You had companies deploying advanced internet architecture, encrypted messaging and satellite GPS, all while the legal framework evaluating them was literally written before the commercial availability of the light bulb.
Let alone the airplane, right?
Yep.
Which is just wild. And that brings us to the core mission of our deep dive today.
Right, the big structural shift.
Exactly. We are unpacking the Telecommunications Bill of 2023 along with the massive wave of subsequent 2024 and 2025 rules. Because listen, this goes way beyond cell towers. This touches national security, your fundamental right to privacy, and the everyday apps you use. Okay, let's unpack this.
To understand the sheer scale of what happened, you have to look at the broader strategic relevance. The telecom sector required a complete structural rejuvenation.
Right.
The government needed to establish regulatory stability for this next massive phase of digital expansion. They had to balance making India a frictionless environment for global investment while simultaneously locking down incredibly strict national security protocols.
And to figure out where this new legislation is taking us, we really first have to understand the archaic foundation it's replacing. So let's lay down a quick background layer here.
Yeah, the historical evolution is key.
I was looking at the specific colonial era laws being scrapped, and it reads like a museum catalog. Write these dates down if you're tracking the governance reform.
Yeah.
We're talking about the Indian Telegraph Act of 1885, the Indian Wireless Telegraphy Act of 1933, and the Telegraph Wires Unlawful Possession Act of 1950.
Yeah. They basically ripped out the copper wire foundation of their telecom laws and replaced it with a fiber optic framework.
That's a good way to put it. Because maintaining those old laws in the 5G era, it's like trying to govern modern internet traffic using maritime pirate laws.
Exactly. The fundamental problem was that those older laws lacked the vocabulary to even describe modern telecommunications. If a foreign investor wanted to build infrastructure, the paperwork was routed through jurisdictions that barely understood the technology.
So what's the new governance reform framework?
Under the new 2023 bill, prior authorization from the central government is still mandatory to establish, operate, or maintain any telecom network.
Wait, on the surface, requiring central authorization for everything sounds like they just created, a brand new layer of red tape.
Well, the mechanism of how they do it is what changed. The bureaucratic procedure has been radically streamlined and digitized. By replacing dozens of archaic paper trails with a centralized digital system, they are ushering in real ease of doing business.
Got it. So the authorization is strict, but the path to getting it is highly visible.
Precisely. And that visibility extends to what happens when things inevitably go wrong. The dispute settlement process got a major upgrade.
Right, the new tiered structure. This is a crucial institutional detail to remember. Instead of a confusing web of local jurisdictions, disputes now move linearly.
Yeah, it starts with an adjudicating officer.
Right, then escalates to a designated committee of appeals, and finally to the Telecom Dispute Settlement and Appellate Tribunal, or TDSAT, at the top.
Predictability is the analytical keyword there. Multinational telecom operators need to know exactly how long a legal dispute will take to resolve before they sink billions into laying fiber optic cables.
So streamlining the bureaucracy creates a clean regulatory environment. But replacing old laws is the easy part. Deciding who gets to control the invisible, lucrative real estate of the sky, the spectrum, that is where the real fight happens.
Oh, absolutely. Spectrum allocation has always been the most contentious issue in telecom policy. Under the 2023 bill, we see a massive pivot. Executive discretion has been explicitly removed.
Meaning the government can't just hand it out however they want anymore.
Exactly. The law strictly limits allocation to auctions or highly specific administrative processes. They completely removed a vague clause from earlier drafts that allowed the government to allocate spectrum in, quote, any other manner as may be prescribed.
Closing that loophole is huge, but the law doesn't mandate auctions for everything, right? There is this fascinating list of exceptions that will get what they call administrative allocation.
Right, where the government assigns the spectrum directly without a bidding war.
Exactly. And that list includes national security, disaster management, weather forecasting, transport like railways, public services like BSNL and MTNL, and crucially, satellite services.
Yes, Everything from your DTH TV dish to satellite telephony, that specific carve-out is the turning point for the entire industry.
But wait, didn't the Supreme Court's 2012 2G spectrum ruling mandate that scarce natural resources basically must be auctioned to prevent corruption? How is the government legally justifying handing spectrum directly to private satellite companies?
What's fascinating here is the legal friction that exception creates. You are completely right about the 2G shadow. This administrative allocation provision is highly likely to face intense legal challenges on those exact grounds.
So what's their defense?
The government's rationale hinges on the unique physics of satellite broadband. Unlike terrestrial cell towers, satellite spectrum is shared across borders. It isn't easily carved up into exclusive geographical blocks for an auction.
Oh, I see. So an auction model doesn't even functionally work for how satellites beam data.
Exactly. The technology resists the auction model. Plus, by allowing administrative allocation, India aligns itself with international norms. It lets global players enter the market and expand connectivity to incredibly remote regions.
Where laying physical fiber optic cable just isn't financially viable. You trade the immediate revenue of an option for the long-term economic boost of rapid deployment.
That's the strategic trade-off, yes.
And speaking of the financial side, if you're building a fax and data layer, note that the old underserved area fund got a serious makeover. It's been renamed the Digital Bharat Nidhi.
And its scope is much wider now.
Right. It isn't just subsidizing rural cell towers anymore. It actively funds research and development.
Which is a critical indicator of national strategy. The shift to funding R&D means the fund is actively trying to build indigenous technological capacity. We're talking about financing homegrown 5G and 6G technology stacks.
Tying right back into modernize and strategic autonomy, reducing reliance on foreign hardware.
Spot on. That's a perfect interlinking point for any analysis.
Okay, so the government has modernized the laws to get these networks built rapidly. But having established who builds the networks, what happens when there is a crisis?
That brings us to the most hotly debated aspect of the bill, the security versus privacy tightrope.
The powers granted here are immense. The 2023 bill allows central and state governments to suspend, oversee, or assume total control of any telecom service in cases of public emergency or national security.
The authority to shut down communications is vast. But to understand how this works in practice, we have to look at the 2024 context. Specifically, the Telecommunications Temporary Suspension of Services rules.
Which replaces the older 2017 rules, right?
Exactly. The new rules put specific operational guardrails on these powers. For instance, internet suspensions can no longer be open-ended. They are strictly capped at a maximum of 15 days.
And they must have clearly defined geographical areas. You can't just issue a vague order that accidentally shuts down an entire state. Plus, any suspension requires confirmation by a competent authority within 24 hours.
So the institutional accountability is tighter, but the core power remains intact.
Which naturally leads to the critical evaluation layer. And we have to objectively report the pushback from civil society here because there are grave concerns about executive misuse and mass surveillance.
The privacy challenge is significant.
Yeah. Specifically, the government can notify standards for encryption and data processing. So the obvious question is, does this mean the center could force popular chat apps to break their text message encryption, potentially violating a user's right to privacy?
Privacy advocates argue that the broad definitions create the exact legal architecture needed to mandate encryption backdoors. But the government balances this by focusing heavily on public safety and fraud prevention.
Like the biometric authentication mandate.
Right. The bill requires telecom entities to carry out biometric authentication of users before issuing a connection. Critics view tying your fingerprint to your phone number as a massive privacy risk.
But the structural problem the government is trying to solve is the industrial scale of financial fraud. They want to prevent the bulk purchasing of anonymous SIM cards.
You cannot dismantle a digital fraud syndicate if you cannot prove who owns the phone number. This is also why the territorial applicability of the bill now extends outside of India.
Oh, wow, extraterritorial reach.
Yeah. If a cybercrime ring operates from a server in another country, but they use an Indian telecom service to execute the fraud, they fall under the jurisdiction of this new law.
Okay, so shutting down the network during a riot or tracking a scammer is one thing. But defending the day-to-day infrastructure from coordinated cyber threats is a completely different beast.
It's a fundamental national defense strategy.
Which leads us into the 2024 Critical Telecommunication Infrastructure, or CTI, and cybersecurity rules.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, CTI networks impact national security, the entire digital economy, and public health. A successful attack could paralyze banking and logistics.
So to protect them, the government now demands unprecedented access. They want to inspect hardware, software, and data traffic logs.
The compliance metrics tied to this are intense.
Let's rattle off the facts and data here. Entities must appoint a Chief Telecommunications Security Officer, a CTSO. They must provide detailed crisis management plans. And most shockingly, any cybersecurity incident must be reported within a mere 6 hours.
Let's game that out for a second, because 6 hours is a brutal turnaround. If a server gets breached at 2 a.m., they need a detailed incident report filed by 8 a.m.
You cannot rely on a human IT team to catch that, assess it, and draft a report in that time frame. It's impossible.
Exactly. It fundamentally forces a massive capacity-building effort. To meet a 6-hour window, you must deploy sophisticated, AI-driven threat detection systems. The regulation forces the private sector to upgrade its defensive technology.
And that defensive posture extends to the physical equipment. What's the hardware regulation side of this?
The new rules mandate a mobile number verification, or MNV, system to ensure legitimate subscribers. And manufacturers are required to register IMEI numbers and maintain databases of tampered equipment.
Creating a supply chain vulnerability check.
Precisely, to prevent cloned or compromised equipment from ever connecting to the grid.
And there's a futuristic 2025 update here too. Under the 2025 amendment rules, anyone buying or selling used telecom equipment must now cross-check it against a government database first.
Like running a background check on a used cell tower router to verify it hasn't been flagged for tampering.
It's an incredibly comprehensive security net. But you might be thinking, this only affects giant telecom companies, right? Well, let's look at the apps currently sitting on your phone.
This is where we hit the sneaky expansions.
The OTT loophole.
Right. The 2023 bill took a brilliant, almost contradictory approach to over-the-top, or OTT, services like streaming platforms and messaging apps. It explicitly stopped short of directly regulating them to prevent overregulation.
But the definitions of telecom and message are so intentionally broad that they leave the door wide open for future regulation.
Yes. They built the legal framework to regulate online platforms without pulling the trigger immediately. Strategic ambiguity.
Here's where it gets really interesting. Fast forward to the 2024 cybersecurity rules. The government created a brand new category, telecommunication identifier user entities.
While that sounds like dense bureaucratic jargon, the real-world impact is massive.
Yeah, it brings everyday platforms like Zomato, Uber, and PhonePe under a similar telecom regulatory framework to prevent fraud.
The legal gymnastics are fascinating. They couldn't regulate the food delivery app itself under telecom law, but they can regulate the identifier, the mass phone numbers, or the SMS-based OTPs.
Because these platforms utilize telecom infrastructure, they are now subjected to cybersecurity oversight. The line between a traditional telecom company and a general tech platform has completely blurred.
It has. And the regulator is aggressively leaning into that. Look at the October 1, 2024 TRAI regulations.
The spam crackdown. This is a great example for your implementation challenges section. TRAI now requires telecom operators to whitelist URLs, APKs, and OTT links to control the avalanche of unsolicited spam.
From a consumer protection standpoint, it's a massive win against phishing scams. But structurally, the technical burden is immense.
Right. If a business wants to send you a link to download an APK, it has to be pre-registered and approved. If not, the telecom operator's network automatically blocks the text.
Which requires the operator to actively inspect and filter the content flowing through their pipes, looping us right back to the privacy and surveillance concerns.
Every new security measure inherently introduces a new point of monitoring. It's a deeply interconnected web.
It really is.
So, what does this all mean? If you're building your final 150-word answer structure, or just trying to synthesize this entire briefing, how do we wrap this up?
Your summary capsule needs to hit the core narrative. India has successfully replaced its colonial telecom skeleton with a modern framework.
Right.
This framework prioritizes national security and rapid satellite expansion through administrative allocation. It mandates strict 6-hour cybersecurity reporting. And it expands the definition of telecom to include the apps powering the digital economy.
All while walking a tightrope between public safety and individual privacy. Make sure you underline those keywords: strategic autonomy, governance reform, and critical infrastructure defense.
Absolutely. Those are high-scoring analytical anchors.
Which leaves you, listening to this right now, with a final, provocative thought to mull over. We've gone from a legal framework designed for copper telegraph wires to a reality where rideshare apps and food delivery platforms are regulated as a critical communication infrastructure.
Yeah, the scope is just breathtaking.
It is. So, as these broad definitions take effect and your everyday apps become classified as telecommunication identifier entities, at what point does your digital identity cease to be personal data and simply become classified as national telecom infrastructure? Something to think about the next time you request an OTP. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive.